Hi, everybody. My name is Pastor Jerry Bertelson, and I serve as the Senior Spiritual Care Consultant for the Good Samaritan Society. And I'm based out of our beautiful national campus office here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And it's my privilege to offer a reflection today for our weekly Faith in the Field email. Sioux Falls, South Dakota is a place that is near and dear to my heart. I was born in Sioux Falls, and I grew up in Sioux Falls until the fourth grade when we moved just a few miles outside of Sioux Falls. When I was 4 years old, my parents bought a story-and-a-half little gray house on the east side of Sioux Falls. And as I grew up in that neighborhood, I realized early on that we had wonderful neighbors that lived around us. And two of them, in fact, were an elderly couple who lived right across the street from us in a single-story, square, white house. Their names were Chuck and Irene. Irene was the kind of person who kept a meticulous lawn. She would go outside sometimes with a pair of scissors, and she would cut the grass along the driveway and sidewalk to ensure that the edging of the lawn was in perfect line with each other. Chuck, on the other hand, he preferred to spend his late afternoons and evenings sitting on a lawn chair in their driveway, waving at people as they drove by, while he listened on his transistor radio to baseball games, particularly the Minnesota Twins. Chuck and Irene were wonderful neighbors to my family and I. And as I got a little bit older and I got permission to cross the street, I would run across the street to Chuck and Irene, and they would hang out with me, and I would run around Chuck on his lawn chair, and sometimes he'd play catch with me or play a game with me. Sometimes they would give me snacks, ice cream, treats, all kinds of wonderful things. I remember one time, though, when I was about 7 years old. I came out of my house and I looked across the street, and I was getting ready to go over to Chuck and Irene's house, sort of a nightly ritual, when I noticed that next to Chuck's lawn chair was another lawn chair. I thought that second lawn chair was for Irene until I crossed the street and I went up to Chuck, and he said, "Jerry, why don't you have a seat and listen to the Twins game with me?" Now, I don't know if he was just tired of me running circles around him or him coming up with ideas to play together. I don't know. But nonetheless, I felt it was a privilege and an honor to have a lawn chair out there sitting next to Chuck, listening to the Twins game with him. And that's what I did. I sat down and I listened as long as I could to the Twins game on the radio. I was used to watching the Twins on TV. Listening on the radio was a whole nother experience. So after maybe 15, 20 minutes, the antsy 7-year-old in me had to stand up and start moving around. And so I thought of every possible reason to get up and move around. And I turned to Chuck and I asked him, "Can I have a glass of ice water?" And he said, "Sure, go in the house and Irene will get you a glass of ice water." So I got up and I went up to their side door, which was up against the driveway, and I knocked on the door, and Irene came and asked me how she could help me. And I said, "I need a glass of ice water." And she said, "Come on in." And so I went in their house, which went immediately into their kitchen. And as I stood there in the middle of their kitchen, I watched Irene go grab a glass out of the cupboard and then go over to the refrigerator and open the freezer door and get out some ice for my ice water. But I noticed something when she went to the refrigerator that I had never seen before. I noticed that on the refrigerator, next to all the pictures of their family and their grandchildren, was the school picture that I had given them a couple months before. Looking at that picture on their fridge caused me to pause for a moment, because I didn't have a living grandfather at that time. See, in 1967, my maternal grandfather suddenly died. Of course, I never got to know him. And when I was 4 years old, my paternal grandfather died as well. And I don't have any real conscious memories of him. Thankfully, both of my grandmothers, they lived until I was in high school, and I had an opportunity to get to know them, and they were delightful people. But I never had a grandfather and grandmother together. I never had a grandfather that I could know and hang out with and get connected to. Until that moment in their kitchen, when I realized that Chuck and Irene counted me in some way among their family. I won't go so as far as to say that I was adopted into their family, but in some ways I feel like I belonged. I went outside after I got my ice water, and I sat down on that chair, and I began to see Chuck a little bit different. And to this day, I count Chuck as the grandfather that I never had, my third grandfather, and Irene as another bonus grandmother in my life. When I think of Chuck and Irene, I think of them as this set of grandparents that welcomed me into their extended family, and I felt a sense of belonging. But when I think of them, I also think of what it means to be neighborly to someone. In fact, our namesake here at the Good Samaritan Society is of a story Jesus told about somebody who embodied this wonderful neighborliness. When I think of what it means to be a neighbor, I think of Chuck and Irene. Perhaps you have people in your life who you can think of that help to frame what it means to be a good neighbor. Certainly, I know that the work that you do at the Good Samaritan Society is an example to the residents, to the clients, to your coworkers, of what it means to self-sacrificially give of yourself as the hands and feet of Jesus, to be that good neighbor to those entrusted to our care. And so thank you. Thank you for being a good Samaritan. Thank you for being neighborly. Thank you for helping fund the imagination of others when they look to the sacred and holy work that you do, and they see in you what it means to be a neighbor. I pray that God will continue to bless you in the sacred work that you are called to do, so that in return that you and I, all of us in this organization, can be a blessing to others. Thank you for being a good Samaritan. God bless. Bye for now.